Let's begin. There's a storm that brews quietly behind a charming smile. Sometimes, danger doesn't announce itself with violence or rage. It whispers. In the voice of someone who says he loves you, but drains you like a parasite. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And for too many women, what they call bad luck in love is really just a lack of recognition of the shadows hiding in plain sight. This is your warning. If a man says these 5 things to you, walk away. Immediately. Not slowly. Not after he proves he meant it. But immediately. Because these aren't just words. They're cracks in a mask. They are reflections of his inner demons. And if you stay, you'll either become his savior or his victim. But you cannot be both. 1. You're too sensitive. This is a psychological red flag. Translation? I don't want to be responsible for how I made you feel. Carl Jung taught that we must confront our shadow, the hidden, often darker parts of ourselves. But a man who says this is running from his shadow. And instead, he projects it onto you. He hurts you. Then blames you for feeling hurt. That's not love. That's gaslighting. 2. You're lucky I put up with you. This is pure manipulation wrapped in false generosity. This man needs to feel superior. He wants you to believe that he's a gift you don't deserve. But Jung warned about the inflated ego, the man who hasn't individuated, who hasn't matured. He hasn't become whole, so he inflates himself by shrinking you. Don't think a man like this. Leave him. 3. All my exes were crazy. Jung would call this projection, disowning your flaws by projecting them onto others. If he says all his exes were insane, ask yourself, is he always the victim? Or does he attract, or even provoke, the very chaos he claims to hate? This is a man who won't take accountability. And if you stay, you'll be next in his crazy ex story. 4. You're mine. Now, this may sound romantic to some. But it's a possessive illusion. Jung believed the soul seeks connection, not possession. Love says, you are free, and I choose you anyway. Control says, you're mine. I own you. A man who sees you as his property doesn't love you. He's addicted to control. 5. No one will ever love you like I do. This sounds like devotion. But it's actually a threat in disguise. It's his final attempt to trap you in self-doubt. To convince you that what you have is as good as it gets. Jung would call this psychic imprisonment, using fear to bind someone's soul. If he really loved you, he'd want you to believe that you deserve the best. Not that he's the best you'll ever get. So if you hear these words, don't analyze. Don't excuse. Don't wait for more signs. Walk away. Because your peace is more precious than his potential. And your soul, as Jung knew, longs not for a man who controls it, but for one who sees it, honors it, and walks alongside it. When a man tells you, you're too sensitive, it may seem like a passing comment, something said in the heat of the moment, maybe even something he claims he didn't mean. But beneath those 3 words lies a deep, corrosive form of emotional invalidation. It's not just a remark, it's a psychological maneuver designed to shift blame, dismiss your experience, and condition you into questioning your own emotional reality. This phrase is subtle, yet it cuts deep. It implies that your feelings are not legitimate, that your emotional reactions are exaggerated, irrational, or inconvenient. Instead of engaging with why you're upset, why something hurt, why you reacted the way you did, he uses this line to shut the conversation down. What he's really saying is, your emotions are a problem for me. And by doing that, he frees himself from having to look at his own behavior, his own tone, his own impact. It allows him to keep control of the narrative, where he's always the rational one, and you're just too emotional to be taken seriously. Carl Jung spoke often about the need to confront the unconscious parts of ourselves, what he called the shadow. These are the parts we repress or deny. A man who tells you that you're too sensitive is usually avoiding his own shadow. He doesn't want to see the hurt he causes. He doesn't want to admit that his words or actions might be harsh, thoughtless, or inconsiderate. Instead of facing the discomfort of owning his emotional immaturity, he flips it back on you. You become the problem. You become too much. And so begins the slow erosion of your self-trust. What's particularly damaging is how this phrase gets internalized over time. You start second-guessing your instincts. You hesitate before speaking up. You wonder if maybe you are overreacting. This is how emotional manipulation works. Not through screaming or violence, but through subtle, repeated invalidation that makes you doubt yourself. It teaches you to suppress your needs, your voice, your truth, just to keep the peace. It turns your emotional intelligence into a perceived weakness, and ironically, it's usually women, who are more in tune with their emotional landscapes, who get labeled as too sensitive. But sensitivity is not fragility. It's awareness. It's empathy. It's the ability to feel deeply and connect authentically. The issue isn't that you're too sensitive, it's that he's too disconnected to meet you at the level of emotional depth you deserve. He lacks the courage to face discomfort, to engage in honest conversations, to grow from conflict rather than avoid it. So when a man tells you you're too sensitive, remember this, he's not exposing a flaw in you. He's exposing a limitation in himself. He's revealing that he's not ready to love someone with emotional depth, complexity, and strength. And unless he's willing to confront that within himself, nothing you do will ever make the relationship emotionally safe. When a man tells you, "You're lucky I put up with you," it's not just a rude comment, it's a reflection of a deep-seated superiority complex. This phrase isn't said in love or patience, it's said to diminish you. It's meant to position himself as the prize, the tolerant one, the man who stoops down to deal with your supposed flaws. On the surface, it may come off as frustration, but at its core, it's about control. It's an attempt to flip the power dynamic and make you feel like a burden rather than a partner. This kind of statement is psychological manipulation disguised as martyrdom. He wants you to feel indebted to him. He wants you to question your worth in the relationship. The message is clear, you're difficult, and I'm doing you a favor by staying. And once that seed is planted, it grows. You may begin to feel guilty for expressing needs, afraid to speak up for fear of being told again how lucky you are to even be tolerated. Over time, this creates emotional imbalance. It conditions you to accept less, tolerate more, and thank someone for not walking away, when in reality, staying in a relationship should never be framed as a favor. Carl Jung would have viewed this as a man trapped in ego inflation. When someone hasn't done the inner work to develop real self-worth, they often inflate their value at the expense of others. This man isn't secure in his identity, so he props himself up by tearing you down subtly. Instead of earning admiration through kindness or consistency, he demands it through guilt. That's not strength, it's a sign of emotional immaturity and unresolved insecurity. The most dangerous part about this behavior is how it distorts your perception of love. You start believing that love must be earned through suffering. That you need to get better just to be worthy of staying in the relationship. You begin to crave his approval instead of expecting mutual respect. And every time he stays after belittling you, it begins to feel like a twisted reward, when in truth, he's just reinforcing the illusion that he holds all the value. A man who sees you as an equal doesn't make you feel lucky to be tolerated. He makes you feel valued just for being who you are. He doesn't throw his presence in your face as leverage. He shares the emotional space with you. He builds, rather than criticizes. But a man with a superiority complex masks his own fragility by constantly reminding you of how generous he's being by not leaving. That's not love. That's ego survival. When someone believes they are doing you a favor by staying, they're not in a relationship, they're in a performance. And the longer you stay, the more you begin to lose sight of your own worth, your voice, and your right to be with someone who sees your presence as a gift, not a nuisance. When a man says, "All my exes were crazy," he's not just sharing past relationship drama. He's revealing a dangerous pattern of projection. At first, it might seem like harmless venting or a way to bond with you over shared relationship frustrations. But the deeper truth is this: if every woman he's been with ends up labeled as crazy, there's a common denominator in that story, and it's not them. It's him. Carl Jung described projection as the act of disowning one's inner flaws and casting them onto others. Instead of owning our insecurities, fears, or shortcomings, we project them outward, blaming others for traits we subconsciously reject in ourselves. When a man routinely describes his exes as emotionally unstable, irrational, or toxic without any self-reflection, he's engaging in this very act. It's not just a failure to take responsibility. It's a refusal to confront his own shadow. Statements like these are not warnings about his past, they're warnings about his mindset. They tell you that he hasn't processed his previous relationships in a healthy way. He hasn't grown. He hasn't healed. And instead of learning from those experiences, he's created a distorted narrative where he's always the victim, innocent, blameless, and perpetually misunderstood. That's not just immature, it's emotionally dangerous. The problem with projection is that it doesn't stop at exes. Eventually, that pattern will turn on you. At first, you might feel like the exception. He tells you how different you are, how much better you are than the women before you. But as soon as conflict arises, when you disagree, assert a boundary, or show an emotion he doesn't want to deal with, he'll start calling you the same things he called them. He'll claim you've changed. He'll act shocked by your reactions. And slowly, you'll realize that crazy wasn't about them, it was about his inability to handle emotional complexity in anyone. This kind of man doesn't want to face discomfort, compromise, or emotional accountability. He wants simplicity. He wants emotional ease, on his terms. The moment things get too real, too deep, or too demanding, he reverts to blame. And instead of asking, "What part did I play?" he asks, "Why are women always like this?" That's not emotional maturity, it's stagnation dressed up as experience. When someone paints all their exes as the problem, it's often a tactic to gain sympathy and lower your guard. It's a way to get you to see him as the wounded hero who just needs someone to finally love him the right way. But don't be fooled. If he hasn't taken the time to unpack those past dynamics with honesty and humility, he's just carrying unresolved emotional baggage into his next relationship, and dropping it at your feet. You are not responsible for redeeming someone who refuses to see themselves clearly. And a man who constantly blames others for his emotional history is a man who will eventually blame you too, no matter how different you try to be. When a man says, "You're mine," it can sound romantic, especially in the beginning. It may feel like passion, commitment, or even deep love. But beneath those words often lies something far more dangerous: possessive control. This isn't about connection. It's about ownership. It's about reducing a person from a free, thinking, autonomous human being into a possession, a thing to be claimed, kept, and controlled. That isn't love. That's domination wrapped in affection. In a healthy relationship, love is a choice, not a cage. It's about standing beside each other as individuals who choose to share their lives. But when a man sees you as his, not in the sense of intimacy but in the sense of entitlement, it creates a toxic power imbalance. Suddenly, you're not free to simply be, you're expected to exist within his emotional and behavioral expectations. He sees your body, time, attention, and decisions as something he should have access to by default. Carl Jung spoke of the soul's desire for wholeness, not control. The need to possess another person, to claim them as mine, comes not from love but from fear, fear of abandonment, fear of inadequacy, fear of vulnerability. Possessiveness is a symptom of an unintegrated self, a fractured ego trying to regain stability by controlling another. When a man tells you that you're his, and it's laced with expectation, jealousy, or resentment, he isn't expressing affection. He's expressing fear, disguised as power. Possessive control often begins subtly. It might show up as concern about who you're with, questions about where you're going, discomfort with you talking to male friends. He might not forbid things outright, but he'll make you feel guilty. He'll sulk. He'll get angry at disrespect. Over time, his insecurity gets projected onto your behavior. You'll find yourself shrinking, over-explaining, apologizing for things that aren't wrong, just to avoid conflict. That's how control becomes internalized. The most terrifying thing about possessive men is that they often believe they're being protective. They think their jealousy means they care deeply. But caring is not controlling. Love does not demand possession. Jung would argue that the soul longs to be seen, not owned. When you're in a relationship with someone who says you're mine and means it literally, you'll notice that your individuality starts to fade. Your choices are no longer your own. Your freedom becomes conditional on his comfort. Possessive control often escalates. What starts as checking your phone or asking about a text message can turn into isolating you from friends, tracking your movements, or even threatening behavior. The line between love and control becomes dangerously blurred. And by the time you realize what's happening, you may already feel emotionally trapped. You might believe you're responsible for his reactions, that if you just reassure him enough, he'll feel secure. But that's the illusion. His insecurity is bottomless, and no amount of loyalty will ever fill it. Real love does not chain. It does not hover. It does not control. It does not whisper your mind like a warning. It says, you're free. And chooses you again and again because of it. When a man says, no one will ever love you like I do, it might sound like a declaration of deep, irreplaceable affection, but more often than not, it's a manipulative fear tactic. It's not about love. It's about control. It's a psychological strategy meant to make you doubt your value outside of the relationship and to keep you emotionally dependent on him. At first glance, it may seem romantic or sentimental, but at its core, this statement is rooted in insecurity, possessiveness, and fear. This phrase is often used when a man senses you pulling away, gaining clarity, or beginning to set boundaries. It's said to implant doubt in your mind, the fear that leaving him means you'll never be loved again, never be understood again, never be seen again in the same way. It exploits your emotional vulnerability by making you question your future relationships. It's meant to make you settle. Not because you're truly happy or respected, but because you're afraid no one else could possibly want you, see you, or care for you the way he claims to. Carl Jung emphasized the importance of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating all parts of oneself. Manipulative tactics like this are designed to stop that process. They keep you fragmented, unsure, emotionally stunted. When someone tells you that no one else will love you like they do, they are not praising their unique ability to love. They are subtly disqualifying you from having other options. They are elevating themselves while simultaneously shrinking your sense of self-worth. That's not love. That's fear packaged in sentimentality. This tactic also often follows a pattern of emotional highs and lows. He might create cycles of affection followed by conflict, praise followed by criticism, attention followed by coldness. And during the highs, he reinforces the idea that only he can love you through your flaws, tolerate your emotions, or see your worth. So when things go wrong, you remember those words, no one else will love me like this. And you stay, out of fear, not fulfillment. But what he's really saying is, I want you to believe I'm the best you'll ever get, so you won't leave me. It's rooted in his fear of being alone, of being exposed, of having to grow. If he truly believed in the power and quality of his love, he wouldn't need to weaponize it. He would trust that you'd stay because it was mutual and meaningful, not because you were afraid no one else could care for you. The truth is, real love never uses fear as a leash. It doesn't need to convince you that you're unlovable without it. Instead, it empowers you. It reminds you that you're inherently worthy, that love is abundant, and that you deserve relationships where you are celebrated, not guilt-tripped into staying. When someone uses the phrase, no one will ever love you like I do, they are often projecting their own fear of being unlovable, and trying to make it your burden to carry. Carl Jung's wisdom teaches us that the journey of life is not about avoiding pain, pleasing others, or fitting into a mold, it's about becoming whole. His work invites us to turn inward, to explore the unconscious mind where our fears, desires, and hidden truths live. He believed that every individual holds both light and shadow, the parts of ourselves we proudly display and the parts we hide or deny. True growth, Jung insisted, comes not from rejecting the shadow, but by confronting it, understanding it, and integrating it. Only then can we reach what he called individuation, the process of becoming our true, authentic self. Jung didn't view psychological suffering as a sign of weakness. Instead, he saw it as a signal, a doorway to deeper understanding. Anxiety, depression, emotional turmoil, these weren't enemies to be eradicated, but messengers trying to guide us back to the path we've strayed from. He taught that the soul speaks through symptoms, dreams, and emotions. Rather than silencing these signals, Jung encouraged us to listen. To ask, what is this pain trying to teach me? What part of myself have I neglected or denied? Through that process of inquiry, we begin to reclaim pieces of ourselves we've lost along the way. Jung's wisdom also reveals the dangers of projection. He warned that what we don't face within ourselves, we will project onto others. We may call others selfish when we're afraid to admit our own needs. We may label someone as arrogant when we haven't owned our desire for recognition. By projecting our inner world outward, we avoid responsibility but lose connection, with ourselves and with others. Jung taught that awareness of our projections allows us to reclaim our emotional power and live with greater authenticity. One of his most powerful insights is that the most terrifying thing is to accept ourselves completely. That's because it requires brutal honesty. It means recognizing that we are not only capable of love, loyalty, and kindness, but also of jealousy, manipulation, and fear. To become whole, we must face the parts of ourselves that make us uncomfortable. Not to shame them, but to understand their origin. Jung believed that through integration, not perfection, we become real. He also emphasized that relationships are mirrors. The people we attract often reflect our inner wounds or undeveloped parts of our psyche. When we are unconscious, we repeat the same patterns and wonder why nothing changes. But when we become conscious, we begin to see these relationships as opportunities for healing and self-awareness. Jung reminded us that love is not about possession or dependency, it's about two whole individuals growing together, not completing one another. Ultimately, Carl Jung's wisdom is a call to courage, the courage to know ourselves deeply, to walk through the darkness of our own mind, and to emerge more whole, more real, and more connected to the mystery of being human. His teachings remind us that the soul longs not for perfection, but for truth. So if a man says these 5 things, you're too sensitive, you're lucky I put up with you, all my exes were crazy, you're mine, or no one will ever love you like I do, don't ignore the warning signs. These aren't just words. They're psychological weapons. Subtle signs of emotional control, projection, manipulation, and possessiveness that Carl Jung would urge you to recognize as reflections of a wounded, unconscious psyche. You are not here to be someone's emotional punching bag. You are not here to fix someone who refuses to face their own darkness. You are here to grow, to thrive, and to walk alongside those who see your worth, not question it. Walk away, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. Walk away because protecting your peace is an act of power. And never forget, the moment you stop tolerating disrespect, is the moment you start demanding truth, healing, and love, the kind that doesn't need to hurt to prove it's real.